Doing well today. We're learning Maseches Bava Basra Daf Kuf Lamed Daled. We're starting at the words Tanu Rabbanan, 5 lines from the bottom of Kuf Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. We'll be heading to Iboya Lahu, which is 8 lines from the bottom of Kuf Lamed Daled Lamed Beis, and then we will pick up again tomorrow night. Tanu Rabbanan. The rabbis teach us in a brisa. Ma'isa ba'adam echad shelo hayu banav noagin kishura. There was a man whose children were not behaving kishura. The Gemara doesn't discuss what the misbehaviors were, but they were not behaving properly. So the father was Omar v'kasav nechasav Yonasan ben Uziel. All right, that's respectable. He decided, and obviously in the times of Yonasan ben Uziel, he's going to give it to someone else. Ma'asa Yonasan ben Uziel. What did he do? Machar shlish. He's a smart guy. He sold a third of it, brought in some cash. The hiktish shlish, and he gave hektish in a third. So let's say there was $10,000. He gave $3,333.33. He sold and got in cash. The next third, he was makdish. V'hichzir lebanav shlish. And then he said, I feel bad for the kids of the guy who was makdish to me, who was yoresh to me. I'm going to give some to his kids. So the father tried to not give it to his kids. Yonasan ben Uziel had rachmanas, and he gave a third of it back to the kids. Because then, ba alav Shammai b'maklo v'tarmilo. Shammai walks into the base medrash holding his cane and his coat. He's like, what is going on here? The guy asked you not to do that, and then you did it. Wow, is that even... What? B'maklo v'tarmilo? The Rashbam actually articulates a little bit more. B'maklo v'tarmilo, he came with his staff and with his cloak. Yeah, exactly. But it was kind of like, he walked in with his gait, or he walked in with a furrowed brow. But it was their turn of phrase. Right, like a hiking. Yeah, like a hiking backpack. Yeah. They didn't have like that brand, the Israeli brand, whatever it's called. Right, that's true.
So it's like literally the exact same as this, just inverted.
Yeah. So anyways, this guy walks in, Shammai walks in, and he's like, Yonasan ben Uziel, what are you doing? How can you do that? Omar lei, he says, Shammai, listen. Im if halachically you're able to extract that which I sold off and that which I was makdish, then guess what? Then to the kids. But imlav, top of kuf lamed daled amud aleph, if you're not able to undo the transactions that I did, then meaning either what I did worked or what I did didn't work. Your feelings on the matter are great, but they may not matter halachically. And says the Gemara, Omar, Shammai says back to Yonasan ben Uziel, Hitiach alai ben Uziel, he beat me. He outthought me. Now, says the Gemara, Me'ikara my savar. What was Shammai thinking? Why would Shammai ever think that this would not be chal? And the Gemara tells us an old story that we saw many moons ago in Maseches Nedarim. Mishum the beis choron. It's not. The Mishnah says in Nedarim Memches, Maisa bebeis choron. The story goes like this: Be'echad shaya aviv mudar hano mimenu. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov in the 3 generations. Yitzchak is mudar to not have any hana from his father. So v'haya masi beno, and then Yitzchak was marrying off his son Yaakov. V'amar lechavero, and then Yitzchak was marrying off his son Yaakov. Wants Avram, he wants the Zayda to come to the wedding, but that's a problem because he's not allowed to give any hana. So v'amar lechavero harei sudan nesun lach b'matana. So I say to one of my friends, I say, Gerald, listen. I'm not allowed to have hana with my father, so he can't really benefit from my food. But what I am going to do is give you all of the suda and the field in which my father will be walking as a matana. That way it'll enable him to come, because then I'm not breaking my mudar hana. So Amar Lo, Gerald says back to me.
But he stipulated so that he wouldn't lose his.
That's what the Gemara said. Exactly right. Meaning it was a conditional sale. Nesina is really what it really wasn't a sale. So the Gemara says, Harei chatzer usudan sunan l'chabimatan. Then the Gemara says, Amar lo im shalihain. Gerald says, look, if you're giving it to me, then you're giving it to me. Im shalihain, harehin mukdashin l'shamayim. I'm not interested in this game, and I'm going to be makdish everything you own to shamayim. Amar lo Yitzchak, who was mudar enough from his father, Amar lo nasati locha ela shali shetakdishem l'shamayim. This was conditional. You don't get to decide what to do with it. I'm not giving it to you to be makdish to Bezdin. I want to keep it. At the moment, I don't want to be the owner. Amar lo nasata li es shelcha ela sheteatav ve'avicha ochlen v'shosin umeratzin zelazeh. All you did was give it to me, so your father could eat and drink, and you guys could be nice to each other. Avon taloi beroshi, it should be changed, that's what this guy Gerald is saying. Like all you're doing is shifting the blame to me. I don't want to be a part of this. End of story. But the Mishnah there concludes, Amru Chachamim, Kol matana she'ena she'im hikdisha mukdeshes eina matana. Any sale, any matana, where if you give me an item, but I'm limited, it's not a sale. So says the Gemara. And this is what Abaye, what Shammai was thinking, that perhaps there's a comparison to be made between our case at the bottom of Yonasan ben Uziel, who gave to the children, who gave back a third of what he was given from the father to the children who were not Noheg Keshura. He thought that perhaps it wasn't like the Ratzon of the father, so it can't be done. So probably. Mechira is more final.
It's, if he was Yorush, then it's definitely.
Yerusha is different, but this isn't a Yerusha because he's not giving it to his child. In our case, at the bottom of Kuf Lam Gim Lam Beis, he gave it to another person. It's no longer Midin Yerusha. So the difference that the Rishonim write between these two cases is what David pointed out earlier, is that in this case of the Maisa Beves Choron, he was very clear as to what he wanted. The condition was absolutely clear. But in our case, the father didn't really say anything. He just gave the whole Yerusha. That was the distinction. That's why Shammai thought that perhaps it should be the same. But he said, Itiach alai ben Uziel, Itiach alai ben Uziel. Ashtikal agarata. Says the Gemara halfway down on Kuf Lamed Daled, Amud Aleph at the two dots, Tanu Rabbanon. Shmonim Talmidim Hayulo Lehillel Azakin. It's an 80-to-1 classroom ratio. Shloshim Mehen Ru'in Tishrei Alein Shchina. 30 of them were Ro'it of the Shechina. Machlokes if we have the words Kemoshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe and Moshe, Lokam Kemoshe, some of the Meforshim are not such a fan. And if you look, this Gemara is quoted in Sanhedrin, where we are Mochek Tevos Kemoshe Rabbeinu. Okay, we could understand why. The next 30, Ushloshim Mehen Ru'in Shetamo Lehen Chama Ki Yoshua Benun. Wow. It's like where they were powerful enough, Talmidei Chachamim, whatever that means. We don't relate. And Esrim Beinonim, 20 of them were the regular guys. And here's my favorite part. Gadol Shebekulan, the greatest of them all, Machlokes Rishonim, greatest of them all is all 80, or is the greatest of them all the 20 Beinonim?
Greatest of the 20.
Yes. If it's greatest of the 20, who were relative to the others, the average, the greatest was Yonasan ben Uziel. And the Katan Shebekulan, this one got like I don't even know how to. It's Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was all over Shas and who was one of the greatest of the Tanaim we've ever had. Yeah, he totally redid Torah. Unbelievable. And here's why. Amr Alav Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who was the lowest guy in the shiur. I'm just trying to imagine, like, his feelings. Like when you're the bacher in the room, who's the lowest bacher in the room, like. What does that feel like? I want to know what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai knew of himself in the standing of the shiur. It's an unbelievable thing. Because after all, let's see what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai did. Shelo hiniach, he didn't leave anything unlearned in Mikra, which is Chumash, Tanakh, Umishnah, all Mishnais, Gemara, all the svaras of Shas, as we know them, not as we have it written, because it wasn't written then. Halachos, Piskei Halacha, Ve'agados, the Agadata, Dikduke Torah, the grammar of the Torah, V'dikduke Sofrim, all of the diktuk of the Sifrei Torah, the Kalin v'chamurin, all the Kal v'chomers, Gzeros Shavos, Ut Kufos, which is a reference to astronomy. That's what the Rashbam says is Molad Halavana, the renewal of the moon. He understood the cycles very well, and this was 2,000 years ago. Ugematrios, which I know my father is a big fan of. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had them all down. Now, the way we use gematria is pretty arbitrary and probably, in general, not what the Torah intended. So just because two things have the same gematria doesn't make them into a real connection. We have these relatively ancillary, almost accidental connections. Yeah.
He explains gematria is what we would call Rosh Hashanah.
That's true. Yeah, he does. Yeah, I saw that actually. Yeah. Each letter represents
exactly what else you'd call it, but
why does he do that?
I don't know. Isn't that interesting?
Is that even accurate that it's considered gematria?
Slightest idea.
Unless what he's talking about is, and this is a type of gematria, where, like if the word is Abba, you spell it Aleph Lamed Fe.
Right. But I
Beis
don't
Yud.
think
It doesn't seem that way.
Clear about these cases.
Right.
On-the-Daf Custis Yehavis.
Right.
Chicago Center.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I saw that. Very good. Yeah. Very good. Okay, so the gematria, as David pointed out, and Umashalos Kovsim, the parables of the launderers. What's going on there? Says the Rashbam, Tzorech Yesh Lilmo Divrei Torah. They had to learn Torah. Kedechsiv Tiken Mishalim Harbe. They had a lot of Mishalim to say. The Kasvan Havin Mashalim Melitza. They had to say it in a special way. And the Mishalos Shualim, the mashals of the foxes. We'll just leave it at that. Okay, that's fine. Sichas Shedim, just in case. Remember, we're talking about.
Explain that one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and Sichas Tekalim, the trees talking to one another is Nacha level. The Sichas Malachi Ashares. Again, like what could Yonasan ben Uziel do, right? And then, of course, the Davar Gadol with Davar Katan. What's Davar Gadol? Davar Gadol, Ma'asim Merkava, Davar Katan, Havayos to Abaye v'Rava. Every dialogue of Abaye and Rava.
He was the lowest.
He was the lowest. By the way, he was objectively the lowest because in the 20, they were the lowest bracket, and he was the lowest of the low. He was the 80th student in Hatzlacha. Yonasan ben Uziel might have been first or 61, because we don't know. I just can't imagine number one. I don't know. It's so hard to imagine. And L'kayim Mashane'emar, what?
First or 21. 20,
First or 61. We didn't know if the upper or lower reference of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Yonasan ben Uziel was of the 20, who was the third group. It was 30 who had Shechina, 30 who were supposed to be like Yoshua ben Nun, which is 60, and then 61 would make him the first of the last 20. So he's either 1 or 61, Yonasan ben Uziel. Yeah. Am I doing my math wrong?
I mean, if he's first in the middle, I meant...
He's not middle. Beinonim doesn't mean middle category. Beinonim means that they're average. There's 3 categories.
Yeah.
There's Shechina worthy, there's the sun standing still worthy, and then there's the Beinonim. Which
between those two.
Oh, no. Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Between those two.
Right, Beinonim would mean middle, but how do you, people that write that the sun should stand still for them,
Can we check that?
You got the Beinonim.
That's interesting.
Yeah, Pasha.
So could be that also.
This is just a real lack of knowledge. What?
I mean, doesn't need to hold up this year.
No, we should just look it up. If you have it there, let's just check. We'll just, okay. We'll finish on time. Does anybody see?
Nothing of the word rain.
No, nothing there. Take two cases from Mishnah.
Yeah, the art school note says they're greater than the disciples compared to Joshua, but did not reach the stature of those like in
Like you said, thank you.
So it's 31. So Yonasan ben Uziel was 31.
First or
for
31.
What?
He was either
He was first or 31.
Right.
And Yochanan ben Zakkai was 30 plus 19. He was 59. 49. Right.
Which actually makes more sense.
I don't know if any of this makes sense.
No.
I don't know. The distinction when you're in the top 80, like it's just unbelievable. Thank you for the correction. I didn't even cross my mind actually.
Same.
That was just that particular year.
Right.
That's shiur.
That was his
Yeah, it was Hillel's Talmidim. Yeah. Okay, and says the Gemara, that I'll fill up the those who love me, I'll fill them up like an otzar. Obviously, any birds that would fly overhead would instantly be burned up. It would actually, the added language here is miyad nisraf, based on the Gemara and Sukkah that we've learned a while back. Next Mishnah, 4 lines from the bottom of Kuf Lamed Daled, Amud Aleph. Omer zeh b'ni ne'eman. If a man says, this is my son, and we'll see what the application is here. We can already think of a bunch of it. Are we talking about Yerusha? Are we talking about, as we'll soon see in the Gemara, are we talking about Yibum? Because if there's a son, then there's no Yibum. Zebani Neman, but Ze'achi Eino Neman. So it's not just an objective standard of we trust you or we don't. The context matters. If I wanted to say this is my child, and again, we'll see the halachic application for this, trust, I'd be trusted, but not for Ze'achi. The Yitol Imo Bechelko. If I say Ze'achi, let's say I bring in another person, I say to my brother, by the way, Howard, there's another guy who's our brother. He's like, that's your problem. And therefore, V'yitol Imo Bechelko. So let's say that the Yerusha that two brothers might get is $300. So the Bechor gets 200 and the Pashut gets 100. Let's say the Pashut, let's give a better case where everyone's getting equal, just to make it easier. If everyone's getting equal Yerusha, there's $200. If I'm bringing in the brother, so he only splits my half with me. The other brother who doesn't know this person gets his 100. I, who say that this Shmerel is the other brother, he and I split 50-50 on that guy. Mace, if that brother Shmerel dies, Yachzur Nechasav L'Makom, and the money goes back to the brother who brought in this guy. Naflu Lo Nechasav Imakom Acher. However, if Shmerel does bring in money to the family, let's say he was married and his wife died and he got a big Yerusha from her, he brings in $1 million. So if I bring in that guy and say he's talking to my brother, then that is Yarshu Echav Imo. Then everyone splits that with me. That's what happens if there is this random third brother. These scenarios are coming up more and more about like the risk of people being born through sperm donors, those kinds of things where there are a lot of people who are brothers halachically. Big problem. Okay, we said in the Mishnah Zebani Ne'eman, 2 lines from the bottom. L'may hilchasa. What halachos were we talking about when we said Zebani Ne'eman? So the Gemara says L'may hilchasa Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel, 2 things. Liyorsho. First of all, it's for Yerusha. Namely, if I am a father and I say Zebani, then that puts that child in the will. That puts him in the pecking order. I might have other children, but if I say Zebani, so then that person then becomes part of my Yerusha. And v'liftor is ishto min ha'yibum, and I can say zebani, so that if I say that, then there is no yibum for the woman because the man has a son already, and then there is no yibum anymore. Turning to the top of Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Beis, says the Gemara Liyorsho Pshita. I don't need you to tell me that. We know already from learning this Masechta and especially Perek Yesh Nochlan that when a man says that a child is a child, that he's a zebani, that he's going to be yorish. So that can't be the benefit of the Mishnah. So the Gemara says, "Liftoras ishta min ha'yibum mitzrichale." You're right. We didn't need the line of zebani that he's Naaman. We don't need that for Yerusha. We really just needed to say that it patters a woman from yibum. So let's say that a woman was married, and then her husband was about to die, and he said zebani. He points to a young man in the hallway and says, that's my child. Her yibum chiyuv after he dies is completely gone.
Or
anyone? The Gemara doesn't. Great question. The Gemara doesn't distinguish, so I presume it's anyone. Says the Gemara, but even that I don't need. Hanami tanina misha amar b'shas misaso yesh li banim. And in fact, in the shiur I heard they specifically touched on your point. It doesn't matter if it's b'shas misaso. That's what the Rashbam says, 15 lines down. Just it doesn't matter. Any identification of Yeshli Banim, then it is Ne'eman. So we already have this in the Mishnah. And not only that, but V'yeshli Achim Eno Ne'eman, same as our Mishnah. So says the Gemara, it really depends. Hasam, over there, Delo Muchzak Lan Be'ach. Over there, when it says that b'shas misaso yeshli banim ne'eman, that's talking about where there wasn't a brother. So where there isn't a brother to the man who dies, there's no yibum anyways. So if you add a claim of zebani, you're not changing the current state of affairs of this woman, which is that she is not shaykh to yibum. So let's say Reuven is married to Rachel. Reuven gets a terrible diagnosis, and he knows he's going to die, but he doesn't have a brother. So if Reuven says, by the way, Zebani, he's trusted because he has no skin in the game. She's not getting Yibum either way because Reuven doesn't have a brother. So for him to then claim, this kid's my child, No problem. You didn't change the scales at all. Everything is exactly the same. She wasn't going to do Yibum before you said Zebani because Reuven doesn't have a brother. And now that you said Zebani, doesn't matter. She's not going to do Yibum because there's no brother. Doesn't matter. So the claim of Zebani is totally acceptable. But Hacha in our Mishnah on the bottom of Kuf Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, there, that's Afal Gab the Muchzak Le Be'ach. That's a bigger Chiddush. Our Mishnah is teaching an even bigger Chiddush. Our Mishnah had said that Zebani is Naaman, and the assertion of our Gemara is that that's true, even if there was a brother. So if Reuven had a brother, Yehuda, and Reuven gets this diagnosis, he has 2 months to live. So he has a brother, which means Yibum is viable. Now the claim of Zebani changes the scales, and it makes it so that she wouldn't be doing Yibum. Says our Mishnah that Taka, we do listen to her. We do listen to the husband, and that is considered Yibum. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Mipnei ma amru zebani ne'eman. Why is it, Taka, that he's trustworthy to ever say that? Says the Gemara, Ho'elu ba'al she'amar gerashti es ishti ne'eman. Ho'el, the halachic power of a ho'el. Since X, therefore Y. Since he's able to say gerashti es ishti, that he's able to always say that he divorced his wife. And what would that do? That would remove Yibum. So he's also trusted to say b'ni ne'eman. Since we're able to make the viable claim of I divorced her, and anyone would have to believe me, seemingly even without paperwork, even without a get, we would trust a man to say I divorced her, which means that I have the power verbally to prevent her from going through Yibum. Then therefore, B'ni Ne'eman should also work because it's the same thing. When I say Gerashti es Ishti, that's the same effect as saying Zebani, which is that both of them prevent a woman from Yibum. So Amar Rav Yosef, Marid Avram, how in the world could you say that the source for believing B'ni Ne'eman is Shmuel v'Amora? Tali Tanya, B'delo Tanya. We have a Mishnah we're trying to explain. We asked, why is it that in our Mishnah, when it says B'ni Ne'eman, Zebani, that he's believed, we said the reason why it's true is because of what Shmuel said, because of Hoel. Shmuel is not a brisa. So Tali Tanya, you're trying to make our Mishnah be learned from a later generation, from an Amora. That's Tali Tanya b'delo Tanya. You're making a brisa dependent on something which is in the Amoraim. So it says the Gemara, that can't be. So Rav Yosef pivots and says, Eli Itmar, Hachi Itmar. Really, this is what probably needs to be said if in fact there was an Amora from Rav Yosef. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, should be Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Mipnei ma amru b'ni ne'eman, says the Gemara, don't say it in the name of an Amora, but ho l'viyadu l'garsha. So it says the Gemara, this is a more powerful svara. This requires research because it doesn't feel very different than our original answer. Our original answer was mipnei ma amru. We said ho l'bal she'amar girashis isho ne'eman. Now we're just saying slightly different language. Ho l'viyadu l'garsha. So this is going to have to be researched because it is very, very, very similar language. And the Rashbam points out that this is a halachic migru, whereas the previous one wasn't. Why is there a difference? Rishonim, not for now. But the point is that it's not Tali Tanya b'delo Tanya, but rather Ho l'viyadu l'garsha is a migu. Therefore, it's powerful enough, even though there is no source directly in the Tanaim. Amar Rav Yosef, Hashta de Amr Samrin and Hoil. Now that we believe in the principle of Hoil, that I'm allowed to say Zebani based on the fact that I could have said I divorced her. Now that I say that, then I would always trust a husband to say Gerashti es ishti, no matter what the circumstances are, because I always could have made that claim, easy peasy, because I could have divorced her. Therefore, I can say she's divorced from me. Yasa Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef Amar Rav Yochanan Baal Shamar Gerashti es ishti eino neman. So I completely disagree. A husband is not allowed to say Gerashti es ishti. And Me'afeach Rav Sheshes Biyadei Ozalei whole of Rav Yosef. The whole of Rav Yosef is gone because we see that Rav Yochanan doesn't agree. Rav Yosef holds that Gerashti es ishti does not work. So do we say Hoil works or do we say Hoil does not work in this case of Gerashti es ishti? Says the Gemara, Eini, how can you say that that's what's going on with Rav Yochanan? How could Rav Yochanan have ever said that Gerashti es ishti is eino neman? V'ha'amar Rav Chia bar Abba bar Ovin Amar Rav Yochanan Baal Shama Gerashti es ishti neman. Now we have a stira within Rav Yosef, and with this we're going to close Lo Kasha. Kan lemafreya and kan lehaba. One of them is talking about retroactively, and one of them is talking about in the future. Namely, there are times when a husband says gerashti es ishti and it's neman, and there are times when it doesn't. Take a look at the Rashbam, which is about 20 lines from the bottom. First word on the line is the Amar, and the Dibra Maschel is the Mafreya. Im Amar lefaneinu be'echad be'iyar ve'amar gerashti es ishti be'echad benisan eino neman. You can't go back in time to say that I divorced her a month ago. But kanu lahaba, the next Rashbam, kanu lahaba, im Amar gerashti es ishti stam, inami achshav gerashti, the eino made mafre. As long as it's not retroactive, then that is neman. So there's no stira in Rabbi Yochanan. We'll stop right here at Ibayalahu, and we'll pick up Emir Hashem with Daf Lamed Hey tomorrow night. Wishing you all a beautiful night.